day-to-day of integration, and do you think you'd see the benefits of going forward in terms of linking more than just your access control, your CCTV, like if you can, in terms of bringing in some kind of the access control cards, and more bringing in multiple technologies, not just kind of security. Is there any other benefits that you would see from other systems in terms of security?
I'll go back to one of the slides that was there earlier, where we were talking earlier about the various, like they're doing blood tests and products. We're looking at things like our patient property. Patients get moved around the hospital quite a lot. The property may not go with them, the theatres, etc. So blood tests and all that. So there's a whole, and I know we're talking about sort of scrub machines and all that sort of things we use as examples. So when you look across the hospital, the amount of systems that are out there is quite phenomenal. We're not going to use everything, absolutely we're not. But if we can just track and trace, I used to work at Harrods before I went to King's. What a massive culture change, absolutely. Okay, everybody at Harrods was lovely, wanted to be there, had to play by the rules. You come to King's, most people don't want to be in a hospital. Okay, so it's a case of what do we do? So if we can look at things like asset tagging, say the amount of items that are in a hospital, be it from stores, be it from equipment, we're looking at scanners, £30,000. We've lost a scanner, where is it? We've lost a bed, where's the bed? And the amount of time that's spent looking for beds and scanners and pressure monitors, you name it. Okay, now if we could just introduce something like, I don't know, like a simple store system, so as it's moving around the hospital we can track it. We did it once for infection control reasons for patients, so we could track infection control around. So if we suddenly got an infection on this ward, might it have come from another ward, and how was that all working? So we want to just translate that across into as simple as, where's that bed? It's gone to the storeroom, it's gone to another ward, where's that piece of equipment? So yeah, there's a lot to do, it costs, but it isn't just the money, it's actually the time, and it's getting those people involved. So yeah, there's lots and lots that we would like to sort of incorporate.
Sorry. Any questions? Anybody can think of anything as we go back through? I suppose I was going through the speakers from this morning for in terms of Michael and integration. Moving on to pass in terms of locking regulations. How to secure a door. No. There. Oh, there we go.
I actually have one for there. Oh.
Hello.
How are you?
How are you doing? I have a question for you regarding do you know the new VAT requirements which are in 3218? Or what is the minimum VAT requirement?
There isn't. There is the straight answer. Yeah, as I was saying, you would see an adoption of EN 5423. That's a European, regulation. So our standards are 2013. But what you find since 1989, the next review was 2008 for emergency lighting and 2009 for fire. That was, a long period of time. But what you're finding now is that with the working group I'm involved with and the working group that other people involved, including Paddy, etc., is that it's happening more quickly. So you're finding the certain changes that are happening in Europe are filtering down to, individual country standards, because, we may say that we have a European standardization of, standards across Europe, but Pat will tell you also that it's, the way we approach our standards is kind of different in each country, and trying to harmonise that under one group has always been a difficulty. But VADs, as I said, will only be adopted going forward. The reason I introduced it into the conversation is because, let us be honest, anything that happens with our cousins in the US or in UK or mainland Europe eventually filters down to ourselves. So I would see probably next 12 months you'll probably see a revision again of the IS 3218, at which stage you'll probably see there will be a section in there for code of practice for the implementation of the EN 5423. And just to confirm again, EN 5423 is the manufacturer's kind of criteria and what they have to, a set of, you know, conditions that they have to make equipment to. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Cheers.
All right, Patrick Butler.
Sorry, just a question probably directed at Patrick. It's in relation to electronic locking on emergency escape doors. Judging by what you were saying there, that's something that you're not supposed to do. But I think in practice a lot of doors that have, say, magnetic locks are used as normal access doors as well as emergency. And I'm just wondering, is there any guidance on whether we should or shouldn't use magnetic locks on emergency exit doors?
Obviously is that one turned on? Okay, sorry. Obviously that was the inference of the presentation, and the reality is that you must actually consider the use of the door, and the use of the door if it is an emergency or panic escape door. The European standards, which are harmonised throughout Europe, and you know, interestingly, we've mentioned UK standards, we've mentioned Irish standards, and one thing we should be aware of is that local standards cannot be in conflict with a European standard. So if a local standard is actually different to the European standard is going to win. Now, you know, it's very much a bigger subject, and the question you've actually asked me here is very specific. Should we be fitting magnets onto escape doors? The simple answer is no. What we should be doing is we actually should be providing escape to EM179 via a lever handle or a paddle handle, or EM1125 via a crash bar. That doesn't prohibit or stop you actually making that an access control door. We shouldn't, but by the same token, we shouldn't be trying to control people's access on the flow of the escape route. Now, again, I know this is not always possible. You know, you have to accept I live in cloud cuckoo land because I only live in a perfect world. But there are times when you might wish to control the flow against the direction of escape, or in the direction of escape, I should say. And until recently, you actually couldn't do that. So what you were actually doing is you were saying, well, actually, my need to control that door and put access control in overrides the design purpose of the door, which clearly is wrong. And certain areas where you can pick up on, and sorry, I'm not meant to be rude here, but hospitals, a great place to control access is actually on the corridor doors, because you actually have one lock instead of a number of different locks. But actually we shouldn't be controlling that door, because that door was put there for a reason. The door was put there as part of an escape route, or more likely the door was put there to actually compartmentalise the building into smaller areas and also to provide escape. So we should never forget the design brief, but the truth is it's a much bigger question. The simple answer is, if you look at the technical guidance document for magnetic lock-in, it actually says you shouldn't put a magnet on an escape route. They're not suitable for that type of application. 179, 1125 apply, and I did touch on a standard there, EN 13637, which is for electrically controlled emergency exit systems, which is literally just with us now, and that actually may allow us to do some of the things that we've traditionally done in the past, but it won't allow us to just go and buy those individual components and actually block that door. So hopefully I've given you enough information there.
Yeah, it's just, I think in practice there are a lot of installations where we do have exactly what we should have according to your information there. You know, if it's a dual function door, if it's both for normal access and emergency exit. I think typically you'll have a push button, you know, you might have a magnetic lock, push button and an emergency brake glass.
That's actually been driven by the fire department, and the fire department done a great job. So, you know, be careful. You know, I lecture this to fire departments in the UK, and after about the first half an hour of the presentation, you can see a lot of very annoyed fire officers around the room. They've done a great job. They taught us we need to escape a building. They've actually taught us to split buildings into smaller areas to resist the spread of fire. They then realised that smoke was the next big killer, because we've now restricted fire, but now smoke's a problem. So we now make a smoke door as well. And all of these are things that are actually prescribed by our original planning permission and the regulations that are set down. And what we're now doing is we're coming back in and we're trying to change that, and that's when we put the magnetic lock on the door. But we must always remember the design use of the door. But our fire brigade, having driven all of the responsible people to actually design a building so that you can escape, clearly they're firemen. They actually have a blinkered view. They're thinking about fire. And this is why the Europeans say, stop calling it a fire escape. It's not a fire escape. And that's why the green running man, of course, we're not panicking because this is an emergency escape door, so we're not running. But the green running man says, this is your escape door. You need to go through that door in the event of a fire. You need to go through that door in the event of a gas leak or any other incident why we need a flood. There could be numerous reasons why we wish to escape. And our magnet, from a fire perspective, is always going to be fail unlocked. So actually there's no blocking on the door anyway. But of course that's only one of the reasons we escape.
Thank you.
Sorry, another question directed to Pat in relation to following up on that question. Sorry, Pat. An EFF lock on a door, I see you didn't have that included.
The FF lock?
EFF lock.
Yeah.
Is that acceptable on an escape route?
You pick up on my smile. So the FF lock wasn't included for a good reason. It's very much a question of how much you can actually say in a period of time. FF make a range of locks. The one you're referring to is the FF351, but there are actually other products. There's an FF131, and there are a variety of other products. Now, until we actually had an electric lock standard, which we now have, EN13637, that is only published in August, so we're only in September now. It was considered to be best practice to fit the FF lock onto the door, but the reality is that FF lock provides one of the three elements of EN13637, because if you actually look at blocking an emergency or panic escape door, what you've actually got is you need these three elements together, which is control, activation and blocking. And it's something that's been done in France, it's been done in Germany for many, many years, where they actually do fit 351s, 131s and other products onto escape doors. And what they actually have is a system that's got this control, activation and blocking. So a 351 is by far much better than a magnet. It will actually form one of those elements going forward of this legislation, because it's the blocking bit is correct. What we'd actually need to ensure is that we actually had a CE marked tested solution that gave control, activation and blocking. And that's what we are about to release to the marketplace now, will be those compliant solutions.
If you have a building with 500 people in it and you're compliant to EN179, is it 10 doors required so to be compliant?
Right. Now, firstly, I'm not at liberty to actually design. I'm not qualified to design you and provide you an escape plan. I'm not qualified to tell you where fire doors are. What I am qualified to do is recognise where they are and then actually give you the information of what we should and what we shouldn't do. So I'm a doorman. So can we just be a little bit careful what I actually say here, because the planning for an escape route is a much bigger subject than the number of available doors. We actually have the distance of the doors from where we are to consider, the length of the run. We actually have the size of the door. We actually have the type of building. There's lots of other risks that are involved there, which in the UK are determined by building control. And if building control are unsure, because if you've got a simple building, we can all probably draw an escape plan, put it on the table and we draw it. If we've got quite a complicated building, the building we live in is quite complicated. We've got an open plan factory downstairs and upstairs we've got offices. There's a massive risk from downstairs. In that case, it would be an engineered solution, and then the length of the run, the number of doors, single, double, how wide the doors are. All of that comes into consideration, including where the muster stations are and what you've got to pass to get to it. What I had given you was that I had said EN 179 for emergency escape doors. The European legislation says a maximum of 60 escapees per door. Irish legislation cuts that to 50. It's good practice, and if I'm honest, I use 50 in my head because there's always going to be somebody extra. And if I've got 500 people working in this is a big room, and we've got 500 people working in it, and we've actually got our 100 doors around the room, so we've got 50 people per door. We only need to put 179 on it. That is absolutely true. But of course, when this building gets slightly more complicated, and I've got 300 people here, the other 200 dispersed around it, it's actually a slightly bigger subject than I've given you. I was talking about per door. Does that help?
Thank you. Any other questions?
There's one for Derek. In relation to signing off on design certs for fire alarm systems, would you be of the opinion that the designer, the guy that puts the pen to paper, shows the smoke heads and all the rest of it around the place, that's the person that should sign off on the cert of design, or the person that decides the category of the system, i.e. the fire consultant? You're smiling.
I am. I'm smiling because it's a question that has been posed many times. I think the rule of thumb is that if someone decides where the devices go, they're defining the certificate level. If they're defining the certificate level, in essence, we're putting forward within the standard that they're the designer. Now, that in itself is a difficult bridge to cross because, as we know, the positioning or siting of devices within a building is not all-encompassing as regards what a design cert is for. So a design cert, a fire design cert, encompasses an awful lot more than just the siting of devices, because as Pat would tell you, it takes into consideration the compartmentalisation of the building, takes into the fire rating of the walls, the ceilings. So there's many people, if you like, in a design that have to come together. A design team. So your architects, your structural engineers, your fire officer, you know, everyone that is part and parcel. I will go so far as to say that on smaller buildings, that's easier to do for an individual, but as the bigger the premises goes, it obviously requires a design team. So hopefully just to answer the question, you were looking about, do I perceive someone who identifies or locates devices within a building as a designer? You know, from a common sense point of view, I would say, for me personally, no, but the way the standard and the committee is looking at it, yes, it is that way. And it basically, what we're trying to do there is to make sure and ensure that, you know, anybody, any one of us after, you know, I could give you a lecture for 15 minutes and we could go around this building and we could cite detectors and break glasses and extinguishers or whatever willy-nilly. But, you know, does that make us a good designer? Because there is so much more involved. So again, like Pat, it may seem like a long-winded answer, but personally, I would say that on smaller buildings, it's easier to design. Do I classify someone who puts devices in a certain location as the designer? Well, there has to be some kind of thought process. So if there's a thought process, they're the designer.
Maybe if there's an iteration of the 3218, it could be designed in terms of what's the fire consultant's role and what's the designer, typically the electrical consultant's role or whatever. If there is an iteration on the horizon.
Oh, there will be, yes.
Okay. One other one, the fire loading in the space. That's a nice, ambiguous term for a simple electrical engineer. So what? If I ever ask a fire consultant, please define fire loading for me. Not a clue, or certainly not going to put anything on an email for me. So is there any guidance on that could be implemented in the IS 218, certainly like the sprinkler code of practices, the 12885, whatever it is, in terms of at least that then defines a fire loading is 15 single phase cables or whatever on tray, which is a little bit wishy-washy, but at least it's something to refer to. So would there be a plan?
No, yeah. Well, first of all, I compliment your suggestion. And if you heard me earlier, I was making the point that most of the changes that have occurred in the last 20, 30 years have occurred specifically from people like yourself making proposals exactly like that. So you're quite correct. They define it as the fire loading. I suppose to answer your question is that, it's a document that could be 5 times its size. If the truth be told, it references an awful lot of more other standards, European standards across the board. But I would wholeheartedly agree that clarification on certain parts, i.e. what is a fire loading, and exactly as you said, what you deem as a fire loading, I might disagree with, because it's a very open-ended situation. So I accept that absolutely. And I would prompt you maybe just to send that proposition or suggestion in to the committee. Thank you. Cheers.
I do just a follow on from Roland's one there. I suppose just on the emergency lighting, same issue, design cert. But I suppose the previous one was very specific. You had to be a chartered engineer or have done the FETAC course. And that was very specifically removed from the latest standard, and it says it's a competent person. Yeah. And you mentioned obviously a chartered engineer is a competent person, but obviously there's a lot of other people that aren't chartered that are still very competent. Is there a sort of definition of competency, like how much experience, like how many projects should you have designed? Is there any way of...
Yeah, again, it's very similar to Ronan. I get that. And that's why it's a very, very hard thing for me to stand up here and say that someone here in this room is not competent. What we're saying within the standard, it's not for us as such to lay out a criteria of what is competent. However, it is incumbent upon you as an installer or designer or whatever, maybe if you're broached on the subject, that you can provide evidence of your experience or whatever. So that backs up. So in the emergency lighting, it said ways of demonstrating your competence. They made a few errors, as most people on working groups do, in trying to improve documents. And in 2008 there was an error in that it had to be corrected. But basically it was saying that seasoned consulting engineers who weren't chartered weren't experienced enough to design an emergency lighting system. Now we all acknowledge that would be incorrect. So to answer your question in a roundabout ways, it's really on the individual to demonstrate their competence. But what they're saying is that the mechanisms available are through a level 6 or i.e. any other experience that you can justify. Now that can be from very, attending CPDs. That can be attended in-house training within individual companies. So there are a plethora of ways of demonstrating one's competence. And you're sitting out in front of His Honour and he says, explain to me why you're competent to do this. And you ream off the litany of areas and years of experience in the different companies in the different areas of your speciality. And that is the only way that any of us can really express and explain our competence. Does that help? Yeah.
That's a European phrase.
Go ahead, Paddy.
Sorry, just to pick up there, that obviously being sitting on the European committees, that's a European phrase about competency, because one of the problems they had, what we might recognise here in Dublin as being competent may not apply in London, and almost certainly didn't apply in Paris. So they're actually using phrases like the responsible person. So the responsible person, which was something we use in the regulatory reform order, what it actually says is it says, this man is the managing director of this business. He's the top man in the business. Actually, he cannot avoid his risk. What he can do is he can employ somebody who can advise him, or he can actually pay somebody to advise him, but he can never absorb his risk. But unless he's competent, he shouldn't be doing it himself. And the Europeans like this phrase. And the other thing they try to avoid, there were certainly some lock tests where we have a BS 3621 where we actually give a competent locksmith a bag of tools and we say, right, go and attack it, do whatever you like. The Europeans won't take that test because they say it's unrepeatable, and they use the same phrase with its competency, because competency means a different thing in a different place.
Anybody else? Any questions for Michael in terms of access control, or Tony in terms of on-viv or IP camera systems?
I'll ask a question. Tony. Thanks. Given the influx and temptation to buy cheaper cameras, why specify Pelco? It's a very direct question. Very direct. What are the dangers in buying cheaper?
I think the key consideration is, and the difficulty in the contracting industry we're all in, you can buy a product. You can buy a product today as part of a tender bid, and tends to be the cheapest wins. That's there and then. The difficulty is, from an end user point of view, move a year ahead, 2 years ahead, 5 years ahead. Did that provide best value for money over that period of time? Made the comment earlier, we have systems out there that were done in analog maybe 15 years ago, and those cameras still work. People do not want to invest the money to replace them. So those cameras can be brought into a new system today. There's a value, at the end of it, there's a value in that, but there's also a cost. So approximately speaking, if you release a new product today, 50% of the cost of the new product is making it backward compatible. There's a cost as well to make it forward compatible. So those are considerations that have to be brought into play. So I think cost is one thing, but value for money is probably a much bigger factor to consider.
Just a quick question on that. Will we ever get to a time where if you're putting CCTV cameras in a particular area that they have to be to a specific standard? And I'm speaking of, I've been to places where there's a camera up there. Why did you put the camera there? Oh, because there was power there. Will we ever get to a time where you highlighted a Statoil station, a petrol station, that if you are putting particular cameras covering a particular area, that they have to be to a specific standard?
It's a big issue, and anybody can go and start a security company tomorrow with very little requirements, and away they go and call themselves experts. There's very little legislation in terms of systems. Remote monitoring standards are in place, but beyond that, there's very little standards in place. Ultimately, the likes of NSI, I think in due course PSA, they're all trying to provide some form of guidance, some form of legislation. I think it's years away personally. Damien, I look to you. Would you agree it's years away, or? Yeah. There is a lot of unprofessionalism in the industry, and it's just going to be a matter of time before, the industry wises up and learns its lesson. And if you look at the fire industries and so on, there's a lot of legislation in place, and I think ultimately it will get to the stage in security, but it's got a while to go.
Sorry, on a similar note, in the design of buildings, there's significant consideration, and rightly so, given to entry points from a fire safety and emergency, access, regress perspective. But there's very little consideration given to the door security in those areas. And I know Pat mentioned that there are various standards for locks, and again in fire safety there are certain standards you have to meet on fire safety doors. But there are specific standards, and there's a number of out there in terms of doors that will meet security standards like EN 1627 or there's LPS standards and passed from before 2012. Do you ever see can you foresee a situation where equal consideration will be given to those standards, particularly with nowadays there's significant rises in burglary, and it's just an area that is not being considered. And even here today, I know the emphasis was, there was significant emphasis on fire safety, and again, rightly so. But I think just it's an area that is sadly lacking because there are no mandatory standards. And I wonder if there weren't mandatory standards for fire safety, would we even be considering them when designing buildings and doors and so forth?
I think your question there was really about the security on the door. And firstly, everything I've talked about today doesn't actually preclude meeting PAS 24, LPS 1175, SR1, SR2, SR3, SR4. They're all security standards. There's sometimes is a compromise, so that's from a starting perspective. We also have European standards, EN 1627, burglary protection. And one of the things that we try to do is we try to say, can you actually think of this door as having two sides? So, we're looking at this side of the door up there, that's the escape side of the door. So whatever we do, we must be able to escape because life safety must overrule virtually everything. But actually the secure side of the door is arguably the other side. Well, provided whatever we do on the outside, the secure side of the door, does not compromise anything that we need to provide on the inside of the door for life safety, there's absolutely no reason why we actually shouldn't be able to achieve both. Now, interestingly, some of these things are actually starting to join together. PAS 24 is actually a standard driven by Secure by Design, which is a UK legislation. SR1, 2, 3 and 4 is UK government. LPS 1175 is more of an industry standard. There is sometimes a conflict, but not as often. We now have the European standards for complete door sets, but one of the beauties of the European standards for complete door sets, if you live in Germany, you only buy a door set, you don't buy a blank door and all the hardware to go on it. In our marketplace, we buy blank doors and put the hardware on. But one of the benefits is if I wish to say to you, well, look, the best way up there is I will supply you an Abloy door. If I decide to do that, I can't change or compromise what I've taught you today, because the door closer, the hinges, the lock or the escape device needs to be CE marked in its own right to actually say that I'm CE marking the door to the European standards. So there is some joining together. And strangely, my life, 30 years in this industry, in reality, I'm very much a security man. But I've actually had to learn about life safety and join those two bits together. So, when I joined Chubb, as it was 30 years ago, I sold security, lock it, bolt it, keep them out. But as life has gone on, I'm saying, well, let's cut that door in half. From the outside, let's continue to do what we've always done, which is another good reason not to put a magnet on fail unlocked. But from this side, my escape side, I must actually put my health and safety hat on.
Well, I think the crucial thing here is that fire safety and emergency exits are covered. It's a mandatory requirement, and that's what's driving it. Whereas with regard to door security, it's not mandatory, so it's optional. And if you take it that during the Celtic Tiger years, 40% of the housing stock in this country was built. And while they met, the vast majority of those doors met fire safety and laterally BER regulations, very few of them, if any, would meet any security standard. And that is a huge issue, And I'm not sure where we're going to go with that. I mean, it's obviously not for this forum, but it is.
You are right, by the way. Obviously, we've just said it's mandatory. You have no choice, and that's the life safety and the fire element. And I'd argue rightly so. Security is always and should be a consideration. Now, obviously, from my accent, I'm not from Ireland, so I can only now speak from the UK. But what we actually have in the UK is we actually have NHBC regulations. I'm not residential locking either, but in the UK we have NHBC regulations for new build residences where there's a certain standard. Now the standard for residences in the UK is pretty average, but reasonable. I'd maybe argue adequate. And if we move into the into the multi-occupancy dwelling and gradually move into the commercial sector. This is really where PAS 24 and LPS 1175 comes in. But only for residential, HSBC is mandatory. But once we actually get away from residential, you're right, there is no mandatory security requirements. It's very much down to the customer or to the architect or to the specifier. And there's one thing I would always say is the holy grail. We really always should be talking to our end user, and it's an argument I've many times with architects, you know, I want this fancy handle. Well, I'm sorry, it's not compliant. And they feel it's their building, but actually we should always remember it's the end user's building, and we should be looking to them to give us the guidance.
Thank you. Have we got any follow-on questions? Or for anybody else here today in the panel? Last opportunity. I'd just like to conclude our morning event here today, and by first of all thanking our panel. And I think the information they brought out today was very informative for everybody, and I think it was a great benefit to the audience. I'd also like to thank Engineers Ireland for facilitating this here today, and of course thank the likes of yourselves for coming along. I finally just say thank you to everybody, and have a safe journey home. Thank you.